Cam Newton didn't just attack Kevin Stefanski's resume. He tore apart the numbers. 13 different quarterbacks in Cleveland. No consistent franchise player. No evidence of long-term development. For Newton, that track record alone disqualified Stefanski from leading a team like the Falcons. He emphasized that this wasn't about one bad stretch. It was about systemic failure, repeated over years. A failure to coach, to connect, and most crucially, to build. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Newton challenged the notion that Stefanski's 2019 playoff appearance erased all other red flags, calling it a statistical mirage built on a talented roster, not coaching prowess. This matters more than ever in Atlanta, where the Falcons are sitting on one of the most exciting young offensive groups in the league. Newton questioned why a franchise with so much promise would turn to a coach with so little proof of development. Stefanski didn't build in Cleveland. He patched. Newton's fear? He'll do the same in Atlanta, only this time the cultural stakes are even higher. Cam Newton lit a fire under the NFL that can't be ignored. His takedown of the Atlanta Falcons' decision to hire Kevin Stefanski wasn't just bold, it was necessary. He called out as a complete contradiction to everything the city, the division, and the culture stand for. When Cam speaks, people listen, and what he delivered wasn't a rant. It was a fully loaded indictment. He didn't just go after the Falcons front office for a questionable hire. He put the entire system on blast. Let's start with what this really is, a cultural betrayal. That's how Cam put it. And there's no better way to frame it. Atlanta isn't just a football city. It's the black cultural capital of America. It's where music, fashion, politics, business, and sports converge around a shared cultural identity that's powerful, proud, and visible. The Falcons aren't just a team in Atlanta. They represent Atlanta. And when you represent a city like that, you don't get to make tone-deaf decisions without being held accountable. Cam made it crystal clear. This wasn't just about wins and losses. This was about what it means to lead in a place like Atlanta. It was about what kind of message you send when you pass over opportunity for alignment and double down on a coach who, quite frankly, hasn't shown he knows how to build anything with staying power, especially not when it comes to young, black quarterbacks. Kevin Stefanski's resume doesn't just raise questions. It waves red flags. 13 quarterbacks cycled through under his watch in Cleveland. Not one long-term solution. Not one franchise guy developed. And yet, somehow, he keeps getting chances. Cam connected that directly to Shedeur Sanders. He wasn't vague. He wasn't indirect. He accused Stefanski of systematically undermining Shedeur, a player who represents a new wave of quarterbacks. A wave that isn't just athletic and talented, but culturally rooted. A wave that comes with confidence, style, and leadership that doesn't look like the old model. And that's exactly what makes them targets when the system isn't built to evolve with them. Cam's take? Stefanski didn't just fail Shedeur, he sabotaged him. And that wasn't a fluke. It was part of a larger pattern. The pattern, as Cam laid it out, is simple. Coaches like Stefanski don't know what to do with quarterbacks who bring both talent and identity, especially when that identity reflects a culture, as Cam called it. Not in a derogatory way, but in a way that centers authenticity, realness, a style of leadership that isn't clean-cut, overly rehearsed, or corporate, but still effective, still commanding, still rooted in excellence. That's where the divide starts. The NFL, in Cam's words, still doesn't know how to evaluate that kind of leadership. And worse, when coaches don't understand it, they often bench it, mute it, mismatch it, until the player either breaks down or breaks out, and the system, once again, escapes accountability. That's what makes this hiring decision such a contradiction, because the Falcons have a roster that reflects that new wave. Michael Penix Jr., Drake London, Kyle Pitts. These are players with talent and edge. Players who need a leader that gets them. A coach who can develop a system that plays to their strengths, not against their instincts. Cam's whole point was this. If Stefanski couldn't do it with a deep Browns roster, if he couldn't develop any of the 13 quarterbacks he worked with, what exactly is Atlanta expecting to happen here? The math isn't mathing. The logic isn't logical. And that 2019 playoff run that people love to use as Stefanski's crowning achievement, Cam dismantled that too. He made it clear this wasn't the result of coaching genius. It was the product of an inherited, already talented team. Stefanski just had to not mess it up. And even then, what followed was regression, not growth. Cam emphasized that point for a reason. Because the NFL continues to reward short-term wins and flashy resumes over long-term development and cultural fluency. It continues to recycle coaches based on past reputation instead of present results. And meanwhile, young black offensive minds stay sidelined. Quarterbacks like Shedeur get dropped into systems that don't know how to support them. And teams like the Falcons, teams that should be leading the future, end up playing catch-up because their leadership choices don't reflect the communities they claim to represent. Atlanta isn't just any NFL city. The NFC South isn't just any division. Cam called it the HBCU of NFL football for a reason. It's not just a demographic thing. It's a symbolic one. These teams are embedded in black culture. They owe their fan base more than generic leadership. They owe them relevant leadership. And yet, here we are. Cam's frustration was about more than a bad hire. It was about wasted opportunity. About what happens when you ignore context. About what it means when a team of one of the youngest, most promising rosters in the league chooses a coach with no history of nurturing that kind of promise. There's a deeper disconnect at play here, and Cam pulled back the curtain on it. He pointed out that this isn't just about quarterback coaching. It's about the perception gap. The NFL keeps pretending that leadership is objective, that it's something you can measure with clipboard discipline and suit and tie press conferences. But Cam made it clear, leadership looks different when it comes from a different experience. And if a coach can't recognize or connect with that difference, they can't develop it. That's why Stefanski's track record isn't just disappointing. It's disqualifying. Cam brought receipts, stats, and context. He even pointed out that Stefanski's win-loss record in his last 2 years was worse than the Falcons' last coach, the same coach they just fired. So what exactly is being rewarded here? Is it growth? No. Is it development? No. Is it alignment with the city and the players? Absolutely not. So what is it? Cam's suggestion. It's reputation, network, and optics. The same cycle that keeps putting the same types of coaches in charge. Even when the results say otherwise, even when the fit isn't there, even when the community deserves better. This isn't just about football. This is about representation, accountability, transparency. Teams like the Falcons owe it to their city to reflect the values of that city and how they lead. Hiring Stefanski sends the opposite message. It tells fans that development comes second to safety. That culture is optional. That potential doesn't matter as much as pedigree, even when that pedigree is paper thin. Cam's message cut through the noise. You can't keep making these choices and expect players, fans, and communities not to notice. Because we do. And now that he said it, you can't unhear it. If Atlanta falters next season, it won't be a mystery why. It won't be a question of talent. The Falcons have talent. What they don't have is alignment. What they don't have is a coach with a track record of building young black quarterbacks into long-term stars. What they don't have is someone who understands the weight of what it means to lead this team in this city. And if the front office isn't willing to course correct, then they're not just making a bad football decision. They're making a cultural one. One that distances a team from the very people who supported it the longest. Cam Newton didn't go off to stir controversy. He went off because the stakes are higher than the Falcons are acting like they are. And now it's up to Atlanta. Prove him wrong. Or prove him right. Either way, we'll be watching. Drop a comment. Was Cam out of line, or did he just say what needed to be said? Like the video if you're tired of seeing leadership handed out like favors instead of earned through impact. Share it with someone who's been side-eyeing this hire since day one. And hit that subscribe button. We got more coming. And trust, this conversation is just getting started. So, let's sit with what Cam Newton actually did here, because it wasn't just a call-out. It was a line in the sand. He made it clear that leadership decisions in the NFL cannot be treated like background noise anymore. Not in Atlanta. Not in 2026. Not when the quarterback position is still the most scrutinized role in sports. and still the most loaded with expectation, stereotype, and coded judgment when it's filled by a young black man. Cam saw the Falcons' decision to hire Kevin Stefanski and said, "This is not just football business. This is cultural negligence." And he said it out loud for everyone to hear, because let's not sugarcoat it. When it comes to young black quarterbacks, the leash is shorter, the scrutiny is harsher, the margins for error are non-existent. And when the coach at the helm has a track record churning through QBs without any meaningful growth or development, that's not just a bad matchup. It's a setup. Cam knows that setup all too well. That's why the Shedeur Sanders angle matters so much here. He's not just a name Cam pulled out of thin air. He represents a specific archetype in the league right now, a new generation of quarterbacks who are not only skilled and smart, but culturally expressive. These are players who lead with swagger, speak with authenticity, and bring their full selves to the field. And that's the very thing that keeps getting lost in translation with coaches like Stefanski. When Cam says Shedeur was sabotaged, he's not just talking about a misread playbook or a mismanaged offense. He's talking about cultural misalignment, a failure to understand who Shedeur is and how he operates. And that's where the system shows its cracks. Because over and over again, quarterbacks like Shedeur are forced to adapt to the system, to change their language, their style, their rhythm. Rarely do you see the system adapting to them. Rarely do you see coaches building around these quarterbacks instead of trying to sand down their edges. Cam's point is simple. Why hire a coach who hasn't proven he can meet players where they are, especially when those players represent the future of the league? 13 quarterbacks in Cleveland. Let's go back to that. 13 chances to build a foundation. 13 chances to find a rhythm, a relationship, a long-term plan. And what did Stefanski do with that? Nothing. No franchise cornerstone. No success story. Just a rotating door trial and error and regression. Cam isn't just mad because Stefanski failed with QBs. He's mad because those failures are never treated like red flags. They're brushed aside. Meanwhile, a young black QB can have one bad game and suddenly be labeled a bust. That's the double standard. And when that double standard becomes institutionalized, when it becomes baked into hiring decisions, coaching expectations, and developmental strategies, then what you get isn't just bad football. You get broken pipelines. You get Shedeur Sanders being treated like a problem instead of a prospect. You get the Falcons betting their future on a coach who has no documented history of developing players like the ones he's being handed. You get Cam Newton standing in front of a mic saying what everybody else is afraid to say. This is not it. Because hiring Kevin Stefanski in this moment with this team, in this city, isn't just tone deaf, it's damaging. Cam's frustration is layered. It's not just what happened. It's how often it keeps happening. How many times do we see coaches fail up? How many times do we see young black QBs push into offensive systems that don't fit them, only to be blamed when the system fails? How many times do we hear the same buzzwords? Need structure, raw talent, not a traditional leader, when what they really mean is doesn't fit our comfort zone? Cam is over it. And frankly, so are a lot of fans. Because it's not just the football community that felt the shock of this hire. It's the city of Atlanta itself. This isn't a place where you can make culturally oblivious decisions and expect people not to notice. This is a city that built the blueprint. This is a city that gave the Falcons their energy, their identity, their soul. And when you ignore that, when you hire leadership that doesn't align with the players or the people, you lose more than games. You lose credibility. That's what's at stake here. Cam's not saying Stefanski can't coach at all. He's saying Stefanski hasn't proven he can coach this roster, this moment, this city, this generation. And that's the part the Falcons front office seems to have missed entirely. They had a chance to build around the wave, around the energy that's reshaping the quarterback position, around players who bring not just athleticism, but presence. But instead, they handed the future over to someone who has repeatedly shown he can't nurture that presence. That's not strategy. That's regression. And it sends a message, whether they meant it or not. That message? Culture is secondary. Cam made it his mission to challenge that. He knows what Atlanta represents. He knows how important it is to have leadership that mirrors the values and voices of the players on the field and the fans in the stands. He's not calling for performative hiring. He's calling for intentional leadership, for hiring coaches who understand that football is more than schemes and systems. It's relationships, it's psychology, it's trust. And you can't build trust with players you don't understand. That's the heart of it. Cam didn't just go off to make a headline. He made a statement that this league needs to stop pretending that development is a technical issue. It's a cultural one. You want to develop Shedeur Sanders? Start by hiring a coach who respects what he brings, not one who sees it as a liability. You want to get the most out of Michael Penix Jr.? Don't force him into a system that already failed 13 quarterbacks. You want to win in Atlanta? Then stop making decisions that alienate Atlanta. Cam said it because it needed to be said. Because if the Falcons flame out next season, and let's be honest, that's a strong possibility, it won't be due to lack of talent. It'll be because the leadership didn't reflect the reality. And reality is this: the league is changing. The quarterback archetype is evolving. The culture is becoming more visible, more vocal, and more essential. If your coach can't adapt to that, they're not leading. They're just holding the clipboard until the next meltdown. So let's really sit in this. Because if you think Cam Newton was overreacting, then you haven't been paying attention to how deep this goes. What Cam did wasn't a moment of outrage. It was a reckoning. And not just for the Atlanta Falcons, but for a league that continues to operate like culture is a marketing tool, not a responsibility. Cam looked at Kevin Stefanski's hire and saw the same playbook being run, not on the field, but in the front office. The same cycle, the same script. A coach with mediocre track record, poor developmental history, and no meaningful success with young black quarterbacks, somehow landing the job of stewarding one of the most culturally resonant franchises in the NFL. Cam didn't mince words. He called it a slap in the face to the culture, to the community, to Atlanta. And let's be honest, he wasn't wrong. The Falcons aren't just another NFL team. They're not the Titans. They're not the Colts. They sit at the heart of the city that practically defines black excellence. Atlanta isn't just a city, it's a pulse. It's a cultural epicenter. The music, the politics, the movements, the fashion, the language, the everything, Atlanta drives it. So when Cam called the NFC South the HBCU of NFL football, he wasn't being poetic. He was telling the truth. This division runs through historically black regions. These teams don't just play in front of black audiences. They represent black identity. These organizations have cultural responsibilities baked into their DNA. And if that's the case, then what does it say when you hire a coach who has shown zero ability to develop players who embody that identity? That's where the Shedeur Sanders piece becomes so crucial. Because Shedeur isn't just talented. He represents a shift. He's part of the new guard. A generation of quarterbacks who are not only athletically gifted, but culturally confident. They don't shrink to fit outdated molds. They're not going to change the way they talk, move, or lead just to fit someone else's version of what quarterback demeanor looks like. And that makes them vulnerable in a system that still clings to outdated ideas about leadership. That's what Cam was pointing at. That Shedeur wasn't just underutilized by Stefanski. He was undermined, not because of skill, but because of fit, because of perception. Because a quarterback who carries himself with authenticity gets treated like a distraction instead of a leader. And Cam's not speaking theoretically. He lived it. He knows how quickly a black quarterback can be labeled when they don't fit the mold. He knows what it's like to be dissected for everything but your actual play. The tone of your voice in a press conference, the color of your cleats, the way you celebrate a touchdown, the audacity to exist in your own skin while holding one of the most scrutinized jobs in America. So when he saw Stefanski, a coach with a proven inability to develop quarterbacks, let alone ones like Shedeur, get another opportunity in Atlanta of all places, that wasn't a coincidence. That was a symptom of a larger system that keeps rewarding familiarity over effectiveness, that keeps ignoring culture when it's inconvenient, that keeps acting like leadership is colorblind when all the evidence says otherwise. And the Falcons, they had a chance to break that cycle, to be intentional, to build something that didn't just work on the field, but resonated off of it. Instead, they hired a coach whose most talked about accomplishment is a playoff appearance that, as Cam reminded us, had more to do with a stacked roster than coaching brilliance. And what happened after that playoff run? Decline, regression, quarterback roulette. Stefanski cycled through 13 different starters and still couldn't find or develop a long-term answer. Cam brought that up for a reason. Because if you're trying to build a future in Atlanta, with Michael Penix Jr. quarterback, with Drake London and Kyle Pitts developing into cornerstones, then why would you put that future in the hands of someone who's already proven they can't build one? You don't need a motivational speaker in that locker room. You need someone who understands how to grow talent, how to listen, how to adapt. Someone who doesn't flinch when a player doesn't act like a 1950s stereotype of a quarterback. Someone who doesn't call it immaturity just because a player has flavor, swagger, or identity. Because that's what Cam was talking about. Coaches who want quarterbacks without culture, leadership without voice. And when players don't match that sanitized image, they get labeled difficult, inconsistent, or not ready. That's how careers get mismanaged. That's how potential gets wasted. And let's not forget, Cam wasn't just speculating about Stefanski's lack of development success. He pointed to cold facts. A worse win-loss record in his last 2 seasons in Cleveland than the Falcons' previous coach. The same coach Atlanta just fired. So how does hiring someone with worse results equal progress? It doesn't. This hire was never about trajectory. It was about comfort. Cam's critique exposed a gap between the appearance of leadership and the reality of it. Stefanski fits the image, but the substance, the ability to adapt, to connect, to grow young players, especially black quarterbacks, that's not there. And that's what makes this so frustrating. Because Atlanta had a chance to do something bold, something aligned, something that honored the culture it represents. Instead, they took the safe route, the predictable one. The one that keeps getting players like Shedeur overlooked, misunderstood, and underdeveloped. Cam didn't go off because he wanted attention. He went off because he's tired of watching the cycle repeat. He's tired of seeing the culture that fuels the league get sidelined when it comes time to make real decisions. He's tired of the double standards, the missed opportunities, and the performative diversity that never reaches the top. He said what needed to be said. And whether you agree with him or not, you can't deny that he's forcing the conversation that too many people are scared to have about who gets the lead, about what leadership actually looks like, and about what it means when a franchise ignores the very community it claims to represent. If the Falcons want to move forward, it won't be enough to put talent on the field. They'll need to build trust off it, and that starts with alignment, with intentionality, with leadership that understands the weight of what has been handed. Because this isn't just football, it's legacy. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Cam go too far? Or did he finally say what everyone else has been tiptoeing around? Like this if you're tired of the NFL playing it safe at the expense of its own future. Share it if you've been watching Atlanta closely and wondering who's really steering the ship. And hit that subscribe button. We got a whole lot more to unpack. And this story, it's just beginning.